All right, so now we're not only going to push the boundaries, we're going to create new ones. And Dan Pecheco is going to tell us how this is happening in ways that make it much more accessible to all of us.
Okay, thanks, Gary. So hello, for those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Dan Pecheco. I serve as the Journalism and Innovation Chair at the Newhouse School in Syracuse. And I'm excited to be back here for my third time, I think. My second time here at NCSA, so thanks for hosting us. And I'm here to talk about XR. Anyone heard this term before? There's a lot of R's out there. We're going to kind of go through what the different R's are. But really what this comes down to is how media is inevitably moving beyond the rectangle. And to start off, I want to begin with this story, which anybody read this before? Very few people have read it, I'm surprised. It's free online. It came out about 100 years ago, and it's by a mathematician. So my dad is a mathematician, and he had me read it when I was pretty young, and it was interesting. So the author is a square, and that's his name, is a square. And basically, the square lives in flatland. Everything is completely flat, so it's a completely two-dimensional land, right? And so the only things you have there are lines. Well, you have points, lines, and then you have multi-sided people, and as they move around, they sort of go like this, because everyone's on a flat sphere, essentially, or a plane, and they just see kind of the edge. And one day, a new creature shows up. It's a sphere, and the sphere is in 3 dimensions and descends across that plane and freaks everybody the hell out because they see this thing go woo, they're like, what is this witchcraft? And the sphere is very quickly put into jail. There's a trial, and while he's in jail, this square is really interested in talking to, he's probably a journalist, right? Interested in talking to the person of interest who's in jail. He's like, what's with the you operate differently. Are you a witch? And he's like, no, I'm a sphere. I come from, it's like, but you're a square, so I have other dimensions. Like, what are other dimensions? And so ultimately, the sphere takes the square out of the second dimension into the third, and then the square can then see, oh my gosh, everything is in 3 dimensions. He goes back, the sphere eventually then escapes, and the square, I think, starts some kind of religion about the 3rd dimension. Really, someone should make a movie about that. And so, I see this as a metaphor for the media world we live in, at least the visual media. NPR is something different, and I love, there's actually something that I would like anyone who's interested in audio to try on the Magic Leap in a little bit, because it's not just about visual, but basically, why are we still all stuck on looking at things in 2 dimensions? You think about it, it's all rectangles everywhere. So, a screen, it's a rectangle. I have one in my pocket, there's one right up here, there's, books here, newspapers. Well, it's really a historic accident that we're consuming media in something that's different from our native format, which is all the dimensions. And what's changed now is extended reality products, which you probably have used some of these, others are pretty new, and you'll get the chance to try a couple of the newest ones here. They are making it easier and less expensive than ever for people to finally consume media in their native format. So the way I like to think of VR and AR and MR and whatever R's is not so much, it's like, ooh, this is a neat new thing, but this is, I think, I'm convinced that 10 to 15 years from now, people will look back at everything that we consume now and call it flatties, right? Because it's just going to be so natural. And it looks a little goofy right now. You have the opportunity to look goofy in front of all your friends today if you choose. But we're seeing the very, very beginning of media finally working in our native format. So what are all the different R's? For those of you who you kind of hear these terms, VR, it's fully immersive, and it's really a transportation device. You're taken somewhere else. And the leaders in that space right now are the Oculus Rift, which is owned by Facebook, which is why it's not going to go away, HTC Vive. Windows does a little bit in this. There's a bunch of Chinese knockoffs. But you put the headset on and you're taken somewhere else for the most part. AR, I think that Ray Soto was talking about that tomorrow, but that's holding your phone out, and maybe also Amy. And you see things kind of through a lens, and it looks 3D, but it's still 2D in your rectangle. So I kind of see that as just a currently convenient way to satisfy the part of your brain that wants that full dimensionality, but eventually I see that going away as well. Because the 3D is simulated. There's no depth in there. It's all sort of imaginary. It's tricking your brain. It's giving your brain what your brain is wanting, which is 3D, but it's not really 3D, just like watching a Pixar movie on a 2D screen. Then there's mixed reality or spatial computing or blended reality, sometimes people call this. And it's fully immersive, but you're in your physical space, and the 3D objects that you see in the space, some of them are virtualized, and they have depth, they have shape. They respect the physical boundaries, furniture, other people, they interact with it. And so that's what the difference between augmented reality and mixed reality is primarily, is that the augmented reality is mixed reality and spatial computing, you have structural sensors in there that can see everything. So you may have seen me walking around like this, also during lunch, testing it out with the Magic Leap. It's actually sending radar out, and then it bounces back and maps the room. And then there's sort of this hybrid, which I hadn't really taken seriously until a couple weeks ago. This new headset came into my innovation lab. I tried it on, and I had a holy shit moment and decided I've completely discounted what VR is capable of doing, because the Oculus Quest, and there are others that are kind of coming out like this, has cameras on it. You can barely see them around the corners. And when you first put it on, you see the room through the cameras. So it's almost like, bionic eyes. And then it's using computer vision to then map out everything, just like something like the Magic Leap can. And you can then draw the boundary that you want to be your virtual world. So our virtual world is right over here, just so you know. And at any point, anybody would like to come and try this while I'm talking, you can go into the virtual world right here. You just put that on your head. And I think we had a volunteer. It's so simple to use, I don't even think I need to explain it, which is another reason that I'm kind of excited about this. And what's your name again? Jane. Jane. No, Jade. Jade. So while Jade is going through this, let's just talk a little bit about the difference between VR, for the most part, what Jade's doing, and then over here I have the Magic Leap, which is mixed reality. Traditional VR, it takes you somewhere else, and everything is virtualized in your physical space. So what are you seeing right now?
A lot of lines.
Okay, so walk forward.
Is that safe?
It is. Walk into the lines. And what are you seeing? You want to describe it?
The stone wall and wood, I think.
Yeah, so you're in Stonehenge?
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Keep walking forward until you see the line again, and then peek out through the lines and tell us what you're seeing. Go a little bit further.
Forward. Oh.
But you see the room, right?
Yeah.
You see all the people in the room. So that's what's really amazing about the Oculus Quest. And then if you step back into where you see the boundaries, yeah. So when you're done with this, your job is to then show the next person how to use it. That's how I do demos now. Yeah. What I get excited about this is I didn't really have to explain much at all. I wasn't really worried about her falling because she can see the room when she's not in the interactive space. But it still looks a little funny, right? Because you have this thing in front of your head. In this case, with the Magic Leap, I can see all of you through lenses. So this is more like kind of magic glasses. And I'm seeing other things in the room with me. So there's actually some blocks right here. And if I take, and I wish I could show you what I'm seeing. If I take this a controller, I have a little laser pointer. I can restack the blocks and move them around. I can choose other characters that I'm going to put in the room. So I'm putting a dinosaur and a couple of knights here. And now they're going to be fighting each other. So if anyone would like to give that a try, you just step up, go like this, and then but just hold this however you want, just don't drop it. The way you put this on is you pull it apart like that. It may or may not work over your glasses, so yeah, probably won't.
I'll probably be blind then, but
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah, and then pick that up. Yeah, and if you hold this, so do you see the dinosaur over here?
No.
You actually want this to be a little bit like that. How about now? As you're walking around? Sometimes it's a little...
There's a UFO in front of me. Yeah.
There's a UFO in front of them. So I just have a little demo there. But notice, what's your name?
Ross.
Ross?
Yeah.
So Ross is seeing the room, so I have no fear at all of him bumping into things.
Fish.
But he's seeing a fish and a UFO and other things in the room with us. And while he looks a little sci-fi, steampunkish, it's not that awkward, right? It's not like you have, you're blinded by this big, bulky thing in your head. So that's kind of a big difference, I think, between traditional VR and then these spatial platforms is that the traditional VR can look really awkward in public. And I can tell you, when I was at the airport, I was thinking of trying this out. I didn't want to put the Oculus on. It's like, I would look like a really awkward, socially isolated person. Whereas if you imagine something like this, one day Ross will be able to just put on regular glasses, just like Chris is wearing right here, and your glasses, probably all glasses, in my opinion, are going to have this kind of capability.
I'm trying to walk forward because I usually try to look forward without your glasses on, but I can't do that.
Yeah, and actually accessibility with glasses is a big issue with all of these, no matter what. But I think Magic Leap lets you get prescription lenses you can put in there, which is kind of interesting. They're very similar. A lot of times people in the industry mostly will say, VR is going to win. Mixed reality is going to win, augmented reality, and it's really all the realities, extended realities. These are all ultimately going to, I think, have the same kind of form factor and be pretty much the same, and people will engage with content virtually and also within their environment, and sometimes it'll be shared. So a big opportunity in the spatial world when everybody has these magic glasses on is that you could explore information together. Right, so imagine you have a bunch of kids, third graders, and they're learning about climate change. And the teacher says, "Okay, everyone, put your glasses on." They put them on. They're all seeing the same globe from different angles, and there's a visualization happening there, talking about what causes global warming, greenhouse effect, and all of that. And they can get underneath it, look up from above. They can then get close, look at the ice caps, but it's a shared experience. So that's what's really new in the last year, I think, is that these devices that allow that shared experience, it's less awkward, that's interactive with the physical environment. Ultimately, everything, including the VR headsets like the Oculus Quest, are moving in that direction. So Magic Leap, it's a leading technology in this area. It's still kind of bulky. This is the patent that Apple filed about 4 years ago, I believe, and they have some new ones that I think are kind of showing up, and they've supposedly had, I think almost like 600 people working on glasses like this. It's questionable if they're going to be coming out with those anytime soon. There are rumors that they laid the team off, and then they're going to focus more on something like the Oculus Quest. But ultimately, this is what all these companies, including Facebook, are trying to get to. And that's what I think we should be thinking about when we're thinking about how our audiences are going to interact with our content and with each other in sort of a blended reality world. And this is from Magic Leap's patent filing a few years ago. What happens with screens, right? When everybody can put, not awkward-looking glasses on, do you need to have screens or do you just have props? Could those 3 or 5 speakers over there and those be kind of like props or screens? And then when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing Game of Thrones, and you're looking at it, you're seeing football. And then over here, someone's seeing an opera, right? So personalization then becomes something that is in our environment physically. Your interface, you don't need to have a phone, right? You could, maybe you're using a combination of your voice and then swiping things or selecting things that are physically in your room with you, but only you see them. So that's going to be a little awkward, right? It'll be kind of like when the first earbuds came out and you saw people who looked like they were talking to themselves. You're like, what's wrong with them? We're kind of past that. So the same thing will happen with these. And then what happens to phones, for that matter? So this was another thing from Magic Leap's patent filing. And they thought, oh, maybe you just choose your apps on your hand, and that's your phone, right? But everything is going to be, it is in the process of being rethought, reimagined. Not that long ago, Mark Zuckerberg, after buying Oculus, basically said in 10 years, everything is going to be in these virtual platforms, and that is the final platform, which I thought was kind of interesting. Of course, Zuckerberg's not always right. This something I'm really excited about is the idea of interacting with data in physical space. So this is a promo video, or actually a screen recording from Magic Leap of a data visualization with data that is served directly out of, I don't know why my video
Being closer to the origin means the contract is coming due sooner. The lighter objects are the...
Back there?
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk over it. So this is something you could try today. Actually, Amy up here tried it over lunch. I showed it to Amy because Amy does data visualization coding in D3 and was like, hey, how cool it would be if you could walk into those charts. And that's exactly what she can do. This is just one of the many apps that is coming out of Magic Leap. You basically put CSV data up in Google Docs, and then you point to it, and then you kind of choose how you want it to be mapped, and then you can walk through your data. Right? So this is kind of a pretty typical three-axis visualization, and then the red and green signify two other data points, and then the size of the circles is something else. I actually forget what it's showing you here, but it's just a kind of a demo. But interesting, right? So we know data visualization is a way to really engage with our consumers. Imagine a day when the web and your app and your site is something that someone is just kind of seeing wherever they want it to be, and then they can step inside the content. It becomes three-dimensional. That's all possible now. This is not futuristic. It's here. It's just not it's not a matter of widespread adoption yet. Here's another example of a data visualization. This one I find more interesting because it's sort of a concept of a visualization that is made specifically for spatial. And so what you're seeing is all of these tubes. The tubes represent time, the length of the tube, and then around them you have different sectors of the stock market, and then the spines coming off there, or whatever you want to call these things, are showing individual stocks. If you get close, you can see the individual stock names, and did they go up or down, and then are they in the red or in the green? So this is probably not going to be the best visualization, but what I like about it is there are already developers out there thinking about, okay, now that we can walk through data, how do we take advantage of this medium? So it's not shovelware, like the last speaker was talking about with how we a lot of times we're looking at Alexa or any new technology, but you can have totally different types of content. So that's pretty cool. So I have that installed here if anybody wants to try it. And then this here, I'm going to see if I can pop into web mode. This is something the New York Times did. You may have seen this in the New York Times mobile app. So this is something the New York Times did. This was it was on their mobile site. It was on their website right here, and it's about this volcano that erupted in Guatemala. And then as you're going through reading about this, you see some photos that they took of the aftermath. And what you see here, it says rotate to explore the damage. And this is a 3D model / photo combination. These are called, the correct term is photogrammetry, but the term I'm hearing a lot more is a volumetric photo. There's also the video version of that, which is a volumetric video. And while I'm looking at this right now, just on my browser, if you have the app, you can then hold it up and then see that through augmented reality and walk around it. So what's really cool is that in Magic Leap, they actually did a demo of this. Unfortunately, I don't have the video with me right here, and they took it down, so I think they're still working on it. But there are already media companies that are, and journalism media companies, who are thinking about, okay, how do we take this rich 3D data that we're now able to get, because we have that superpower now, and then let people interact with it in physical space, right? And in a way that is full depth. So the demo that was on here was like knights in shining armor and UFOs, but can be journalism too, right? There's a colleague I have who's doing some research into how people learn and retain information when they interact with it physically. And he was able to show that he's Korean, and he did a test where he created a virtual reality experience, in this case, of different objects in a room, so like a coffee cup, a spoon, a basketball, things like that. And then you go and you pick it up with your hand controller in virtual reality, and you hear the Korean word, and then you see the Korean, and you then have to then take that object and put it into a box that then has the same Korean word on it. And then when you do that, you then hear the term. And it was something like I think a 60% increase in retention rates and understanding of the information 1 month later, right? That's for education. Well, in this case, imagine that you're trying to understand climate change, right? That's something that is important in both education and in journalism. We're kind of both focusing the same goal. And spatial understanding of that data and spatial experience with it really increases understanding, which should be what we're all concerned about, not just how many clicks and tweets and shares do we get, right? Because if we don't do the former, who cares about the latter, right? We're just kind of, it's another wires and lights in a box example. Anybody tried this before? So we're getting into virtual reality here. So this is the best piece of immersive journalism I have ever tried. It's from Nani de la Peña, who, if you haven't heard of her, you should look her up. There's something else I'm going to show you from her. And she is, she's been called, I think a gadget called her the godmother of VR, but really she's a godmother of VR journalism. Palmer Luckey was her lab assistant, the founder of Oculus. And she continued she basically created the very first virtual reality powered news stories and documentaries. And this piece that was done with Nova, Frontline, and Emblematic, it's amazing. I don't have the video to show you. I don't have the headset that can show it. But if you're able to access an HTC Vive, you should go download this, Greenland Melting. It will blow your mind. What you're seeing right here this is a volumetric video of a NASA scientist, actually both of these people. And so they had them go into a volumetric capture studio, which means basically you have 10 to 40 cameras that are recording them. And they then answered certain questions. They were talking about their research. And then they create a holographic video that you can walk around. So these people are right there in the room with you. Okay, it's in virtual reality. Magic Leap is doing the same thing with spatial computing. They then also had drones fly over different parts of this Greenland ice sheet, and they used a process called photogrammetry, same thing that you saw that was used for the Guatemalan volcano, and they got it was like a real 3D model of that space. Did the same thing with the ship, Arctic Research Vessel, and then inside the ship, and you can go through all these different parts of the ship. You can even look underneath the table, and it looks real. You then are put up onto a NASA plane. They did photogrammetry from the inside of that, and you're walking through it, and on the outside, they have a 360 video that was taken from that same plane flight of flying over the Arctic. And it really feels like you're there. So even though it's in virtual reality, this is it's immersive, it's spatial. You feel like you're in physical space. When you approach different objects, your hand controller will buzz. That's known as haptics. And all of those different senses that get triggered, it really help. You basically not only understand the information better, but you have memories of having been there. So I can go back and remember exactly which ways I went through the ship. Just like I remember 2 years ago, different places that I walked around this campus because I experienced it. So that's the power of this spatial stuff. This is just one example of what I'm talking about with spatial. So in photogrammetry, what you're seeing here is a place that's in South Africa called the Egazini Outreach Project. This building used to be an interrogation place for blacks. They were interrogated in a lot of cases. They were also killed there during apartheid. And then after apartheid, some black artists took it over, and it's an art studio that's dedicated to telling those stories. So we had some students go there, and they basically took around 4,000 pictures of this building, literally like this, from different angles. This is how photogrammetry works. You're just taking a lot of pictures from different angles. You feed a lot into some software, and then after a whole lot of cleanup, you get a 3D model like this. Once you have that 3D model, you can then put it into virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, and then it's then immersive. If you think about this, right now, it takes a lot of work. You need to have a lot of different pictures from different angles. How many cameras does the latest iPhone have on it? 3, okay? So let's think ahead here. Let's imagine, so 5 years from now, you have more cameras like that, just like this Oculus now has cameras on it. They're capturing things from different angles. If you had maybe 3 or 4 people just hold their phones up and take a picture, and then that is available through some cloud service, all photos could and probably will be 3D models. So I believe we're seeing the future of the photo has depth. So, and then once it has depth, then there's the possibility for spatial experience of that information. That's pretty exciting. What happens to web pages? So I'm going to show you an example of this in a second here. The thing that there's a giraffe you saw. So right here, there's a 3D model of Stonehenge, okay, and it's 3D scanned of Stonehenge, and then in it is a giraffe. There's a reason I put a giraffe in there. It was available. I was just trying to kind of like messing around, and then you'll see the words right up here. Welcome to Mobile Me 2019. Okay, that's a website, and it was coded in something called A-frame, or it's something that writes content in A-frame. What is A-frame? This is and this is actually the timing is kind of interesting here. Right outside, there's a sign that talks about the very first web browser, right? NCSA Mosaic, that was coded here in this building or on this campus. A-frame is a initiative from Mozilla, which is kind of the the child of NCSA Mosaic, really, many years later. It's open source, and Mozilla, with Firefox browser, they basically support VR. So you can now code stuff in very simple HTML and then push a button. And at first you kind of see it on a website, and if you have a VR headset, then you walk into it, and it's the same code. Pretty magical, pretty amazing. And I think this by itself, this idea that web pages can be worlds, has a lot of, it means there's a lot of potential for immersive storytelling. And I have a feeling that almost everything that can be immersive will be possible to be experienced in an immersive way because the data is all becoming much, more and more it's becoming 3-dimensional. Do you see the giraffe?
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this here is something that one of my students coded just a couple weeks ago. He had never coded anything before. I gave him the A-frame environment. And so that's the virtual world on the left. You can see it has animations in it too. And this is the code. So those of you who are, I'll get out of the way. Those of you who know HTML, when you look at this, you'll see, this is pretty structured, pretty logical. Doesn't look that hard, right? And that's why I think it's exciting, because the next step then is with languages like this that are made more accessible, right? HTML was and still is cool because it's accessible to normal people. Gary Keppel can tell you, back when we worked at the Washington Post, what was one of my first jobs? Training all the copy editors and random PhDs who were showing up, like Gary, that, here's how you edit the daily news headlines in HTML, and we didn't know if it would work, and everybody was able to do it. The same thing is going to happen with VR. So you've probably heard of Unity. If you haven't, talk to anybody in VR, they'll tell you, Unity is an easy way to create experiences in virtual reality. I predict this is all going to move in the direction of open source, coding based, and then the next step will be content management systems that are built on top of it that then write the code. So I want to show you, if we have time, I'll do a live demo, but I'll just start off with just showing you the video of this. This is the latest initiative of Nani's. I think it came out a couple months ago, and it's called Reach. So if you go to that link, you can actually start creating VR today without coding anything in a browser. And it's very simple, but it's at the very early stages, but it's really powerful. And the web page that he's walking through right now was created in Reach. And I'll open the project so you can kind of see it. But you go to beta.reach.love. Just in the interest of time, this was just me doing a video of the interface. The interface, this is in a browser, and you just kind of click and move around. There I have Otto the Orange, who's our mascot at Syracuse University. I had 3D scanned him with my phone, by the way, so you don't need to have anything other than your phone to do this. There's the Stonehenge on the left. Then you can see I'm writing, welcome to mobile me and you, right? It's pretty easy. And powerful. So we'll get back to that really quickly, but I just want to, just to summarize, everything that we currently imagine as information, in my opinion, is about to explode into the physical world. And it's just a matter, it's already happening. The extent to which that becomes mainstream and normalized, and you don't look weird and you don't look like a nerd, that's just going to be determined by society. But that device, by the way, is $400. You can get it at Best Buy. And it's going to be kids first that didn't beg their parents to get them, I'm sure. And then we'll just see a lot more of these. And then the same thing over time will happen with things like Magic Leap. But ultimately, it's going to be companies like Apple releasing really compelling, fashionable glasses. Maybe they'll be called iPods. I don't know. Woke up this morning, I was like, they're going to be iPods. The important thing for us is not to obsess over the particular technologies. I may look like I'm a tech nerd and that I just find ways to buy technology. But really, the reason I do is to answer this question: how does the content live in content's true native format, which is physical space, over time? And so that's why I spend so much of my time lately playing around with these things. I get a device, and then really like 3 months later, it's in the boneyard. These things are coming out so quickly that the pace of innovation is changing so fast. But don't take my word for it. Actually, I said in the back, probably in the interest of time, I'll move to the back or out into the lobby. If you want to try these things out, you can. But really quickly, I just want to show you Reach, because this is one of the newest exciting things in VR. So here I am in a Chrome browser. Go to beta.reach.love. You log in. They kind of start off with basically different environments you can begin with. So we'll start with this one. You have a skybox. It can be any 360 photo. So if you have a 360 camera, just take the 360 photo, that's your skybox. This is a 3D model. I think the 3D models they have in the examples are all from Sketchfab, which is a really easy place to find free public domain models. But you could also create your own. You could 3D scan things with a number of different apps that you use on your phone. And then when you want to then modify the scene, you can see here I'm kind of moving that around, rotate. And I'm not using any coding, but when I'm done, I click publish, I get a link. And then if I open the link on my phone, I just hold my phone up, so it's kind of like augmented reality. I send it to something like the Oculus. I can then step into it in full 3D, or I can just look at it on my computer. And I didn't have to do any coding. So this is ultimately, I think we're kind of at the imagine this is the very, very first version of WordPress for VR. I think that's what we're seeing. And by the way, you can also move through it. So it's an interactive space. Expect to see a lot more tools like this. Maybe even WordPress will do it, right? Or maybe you will go and get a grant and then find some developers and you'll build something. But ultimately, it's about enabling more and more storytellers, and including journalists. It's not just journalists though that are using this stuff, and making it even easier, less expensive, and fun, because never underestimate the importance of fun, for people to just create these. And as that starts to happen, then that solves the problem of, oh, which headset do I get? Oh, it's too expensive, right? It'll be kind of like the first people who got swimming pools looked like they were crazy. Why would you spend all that money in a swimming pool until you had that swimming pool party and then everybody wanted the swimming pool? We're kind of at that stage, and I think the parties are beginning. So that's my talk. If you're interested in trying these things out, I think I'll probably move off into the lobby. And
We'll wait and see for questions first.
okay, questions first, and then we'll do that. Okay, all right.
Hey, I guess to what extent do you feel like this is an inflection point for like the cost of doing this? Because I feel like you use the Times example, right? But it feels like the resource threshold to kind of do these things among smaller outlets has probably been a high bar up until now. Is this an inflection point in your opinion?
I think it definitely is, and I feel like the Oculus Quest in particular for VR is that inflection point, and I'm not shilling for Oculus here. I actually have a lot of problems with them, especially since they're Facebook. What are they tracking is one of them. But it's, I think we're going to see the same thing happen at some point with mixed reality, and then all of them will kind of come together. But just for context, when I started, when I did my first VR project in news, which was at USA Today with Ray Soto, who's talking tomorrow. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see him. But say hi for me. We worked on Harvest of Change, and that was, just so you know, the VP at the time that worked on this said, oh, it only costs $50,000. It costs way more than $50,000 to produce that thing, okay? And there were a lot of different people we had to bring in. The headset alone, I think, was about $2,000. And then we had to have a high-end gaming computer, which is about $3,000. And then there were there's like, okay, so it was very expensive. But now we're at a point where just to create simple stories, you can and you should just start going and experiment with this stuff. So A-frame, reach, and things like that. There's kind of no excuse, in my opinion, because it's free, right? It's like what happened when the internet, when the web first arrived on the scene through NCSA Mosaic, honestly. And everything was open source, and you could code it, and it was fun, and people did it as hobbies. That's happening now, and I think every journalist should be experimenting like that, because there's really no reason not to. Yeah.
So the question I had is, it's probably been 5 years ago now, but Google tried the Google Glass, and that pretty much failed. So why, if that was not successful, why would you think it'd be changing? Or why would you think now would be the time for that than with these headsets in that scenario? Or what makes this different?
I'm curious to know, did you try Google Glass when it was out? So I'll tell you, and those of you who have tried it, this might make sense. It wasn't immersive at all. it was really more like annotated reality. And so it was sort of like closer to what the Terminator would have in his heads-up display, and as you're walking, you see information, except it was all up in this little corner, and you had to go like that. So I think it was a little different. But at the same time, I think Google went too fast with that product, and they didn't really factor in social acceptance and culture. And they were really pushing for people to wear this thing at all times, everywhere, even in the shower. Everyone remember like Robert Scoble in the shower going, ah, and that was his picture for a long time. So I think it's a little bit different, but at the same time, Google is putting a whole lot of money into all these technologies right now. Magic Leap got around, I think, 1.6 or 1.4 billion in funding, and about 1 billion of that came from Google. So I have often thought, okay, if Google had put one of the 1.6 into Magic Leap, is that really the Google Glass 2.0 play? You know, time will tell. But they definitely have their fingers in a lot of different pots. So I think just because, you know, the version 1 of anything, of any trend, always sucks. Also, pretty much everything. Anyone remember Windows 1.0? No, because you couldn't even use it, right? Wasn't it like Windows 2.1 was the first you could use, and that sucked? And then there was Windows 3.1, and it was just barely passable, right? And then you had Windows 95, which, believe it or not, was amazing back then. Now we're like, oh my God, that's terrible. So.
Is Google Cardboard, is it dead? Because when it came out, I was really, really impressed because the cost was as low as you could get, because it was basically a cardboard box that you put your phone in and then put it around your head. And like the New York Times did their experiments with it where they shipped them to subscribers for free, but I haven't really heard anything since about it. And I just found it really interesting because it lowered the bar of acceptance to the point that it just seemed like it was like, well, everyone could have one of these basically at this point.
Well, I have two thoughts on that. One, it's not dead because it still works, and you can still buy those devices, and they're actually even cheaper now for like $8. There's a bunch of things because all cardboard is it's really lenses. They should have called it plastic lenses in a cardboard kit. And what it was really showing is that everyone's phone, even back then and even now, is a 3D transportation device, right? So you can do it now. No one's really marketing it so much because I think the companies that are creating content are really focused on these consumer products that have come down in price so much. So there's that. And then also the cardboard experience. There's also the Samsung Gear VR. Did anybody get one of those or knew someone who had one? It was like a $100 attachment for your Samsung phone. Google itself had something called Daydream that was kind of the same. You had this headset, you put your phone in there. They had one major shortcoming, which is that they were really swivel chair experiences. So you could not walk around through a space like you saw people doing here. They had no spatial awareness. And it's like so they only really worked for 360 video. And if you tried to do anything that where you wanted to move and interact, as soon as you go like this, you'd feel sick. So the technology has moved on from that, but you can still use it. You know, you could buy one right now on Amazon. I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really great talk. Just like it really helped lower the barrier to entry, and sort of my understanding of starting to think about these things. How many? I mean, my concern though for actually trying to invest time into these is accessibility. Just for how many of them have like a non-VR component? Are any of these like these tools that you've introduced to us? Could you explore them through a browser just with a modified way of moving through them, or however you want to?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of them can be. So you're talking about the creation tools?
Well, no, actually, just once you create it and sharing it out, with an audience, could somebody engage with that virtual world without having to have a VR headset? In terms of accessibility of consuming what's created on these things.
Yes. So if you publish content in a format that works in what's called WebVR. Basically, WebVR is built into all modern web browsers, and it allows you to do things like this. Let me see if I can find. Okay, here we have a 3D scan of St. Giles Cripplegate. Sounds like it's in the UK. I'm not really sure. I'm in a web browser here. somebody uploaded this 3D, ooh, wow, this is pretty impressive, okay? I'm in a browser and I'm inside this Abbey, and then I can look at it from the outside too. And then it's fully annotated. Wow, this is a really, I'm gonna have to like save this one. But if I wanted to then put this into my, or send this to somebody, or look at it in my VR headset, I just get the link and I can open it there. And then also right here, embed, I can embed it into my website, and it's gonna work with, so it's iframe tags, and it'll work on someone's phone in a Chrome browser, or pretty much even Safari. It'll work in a VR headset, and Sketchfab and other tools like this. Look what I have here. This is the so-called cardboard button. When I click on that in a phone, then it sends me into it creates a stereoscopic view, and I have the same experience as what I have on that. So the web is the vehicle for publishing experiences.
And that, what do you feel like that was created in? Do you think that was, I mean, this Sketchfab is a way to share it, but in terms of creating?
This is a piece of photogrammetry, and it looks like it's really good.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to save that. Don't close that tab. Yeah, actually, if we open that on here, we could walk through it. Maybe I should do that, and we can do it outside.
Yeah.
Now, how you move between levels, I have no idea. That's actually a really sophisticated piece of photogrammetry. So.
In the physical space in relation to such a big virtual space, is it one for one?
It depends. Depends on how you sized it. So just like, yeah, that's another version of the question of, is this, what aspect ratio is our screen going to be for which device, right? So you have to kind of plan that out. But the tools are all there, the technology's there, and now we just need more content developers and journalists specifically, not just gamers. Right now, the people who are really pushing this technology is gaming, entertainment. So I teach a class, I've taught a class now for about 5 years in virtual reality storytelling at the Newhouse School, and about half of the students who take it are from TRF, which is television and film, and radio. Although we're going to rename that audio, I think. And then I have some advertising and PR, and I usually have 3 or 4 journalism students, and I'm really hoping that's going to shift over time, but it's going to take more examples, journalists at many fine institutions like the ones you work at to then kind of push the envelope and inspire people to then see what's possible. So I'm kind of doing my part as an educator, but I'm happy to educate any of you too, so you can then try things out. So I'd be happy to give you my card, and then you can follow up later.
I just have a quick question. How long do you see this taking as for it to pretty much kind of, I guess, take over? Because this reminds me a lot of Black Mirror. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
Yes, I know Black Mirror.
It reminds me a lot of Black Mirror, where pretty much technology just controls your life. I mean, it's in their eyes at some point. So
yeah.
Do you see it going, like you said, to glasses? How long do you think it'll take to develop in its stages?
I think we'll see pretty good smart glasses that look like the very fashionable ones you're wearing right now, that are immersive glasses in the next, I'd say 3 years, that we'll start seeing them. There are already some companies coming out with them. I haven't tried them yet. So there's one called InReal. Haven't tried it yet. It's actually someone who left Oculus, interestingly enough, and is in China. So watch China. A lot of this stuff is going to come out of China, I predict.
So more than likely, first get rid of, I guess, movie theaters. That's the first thing I can think of.
It's always tempting to think that some technology comes in and it displaces everything, but that never happens. It just sort of changes the way those businesses work, the way those spaces work. What I think is really interesting about the mixed reality / spatial computing realm with things like Magic Leap, but as cool glasses, is that there's going to be another layer of reality, some of which is shared, that we can all see. And so actually places like movie theaters, maybe this means that the future movie is maybe they level them all in terms of they're not shaped like this, they're big rooms. And you go in there, and it's like the show Sleep No More in New York City. Anybody been to that? It's pretty cool. If you haven't, you should totally go see it. It's a hotel where every single room is part of the set, and the characters run through different parts of the hotel, and you get to follow who you want, and they kind of ignore you. You actually are wearing a mask. I think that's probably going to be, so for movie theaters and cinema and theater, I think things just become more immersive. In fact, I'm working with a theater group in Syracuse right now that wants to do something like that with these devices. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dan.